Welcome to day 5 of IMTS 2018. All I can say today is TGIF. Over the course of the week on this stage, we've heard from a number of manufacturing leaders discussing their efforts to grow manufacturing and to take the industry in the future. Well, it's not over yet. Today, I have the privilege of introducing probably the most vocal advocate of American manufacturing that I know, Harry Moser. Harry has had a long career in manufacturing. He started with degrees, engineering degrees from MIT and an MBA from the University of Chicago. He's a former chairman of GF Machining Solutions, where he spent a 25-year career, retiring as chairman emeritus. Today, he's the founder and president of the Reshoring initiative. AMT is a strong founding member of the Reshoring initiative, all because of this man that I'm about to introduce. Harry's been inducted into the Industry Week Hall of Fame. He's also been named Quality Magazine's Professional of the Year. He is known on Capitol Hill, and he has advised presidents. You've read about him in the news, publications like the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. You've also seen him on talk shows, talking about the strength of American manufacturing and its workers. He's dedicated, determined, and tenacious leader for American manufacturing. I give you Harry Moser.
It'll start to attract it. Thank you, Amber. No, thank you, Amber. I appreciate that very much. Amber mentioned, thank God it's Friday. And that reminds me, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, I was leaving the factory with another guy Friday night at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. And he said, wow, thank God it's Friday. And I said, yeah, you know, it's only 3 days till Monday when we can start over again. He said, you don't get the idea of weekends at all. So, how many of you out there would like to see U.S. manufacturing grow by 40%? Hands, Dennis, okay, yeah, of course you'd love to see that. How many would like to see machine tool sales rise by 20%? Well, that'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? Well, I'm going to show you how to do it, and I hope you'll agree. So I'm going to talk about how to increase U.S. manufacturing 40% without tariffs. This is a different program. This is alternatives to what is being tried. First, I'm going to demonstrate the need to grow manufacturing as a percentage of GDP. The importance of a smaller goods trade deficit. Trade deficit is key to growing manufacturing. I'm going to document the success we've already had with reshoring and FDI. FDI is foreign direct investment, for example, by Siemens or Toyota. That there are limits to this success, that we're on a tilted playing field, and we can't continue the momentum we've had unless the policies are changed. I'm going to propose the actions to remove those limits, to take the tilt out of the playing field, but always with alternatives to tariffs. There are a bunch of myths that influence what's happening, and I'm going to tell you which ones are myths and what the reality is. I'm going to ask for your help. First, I talked about manufacturing as a percentage of GDP. It is down from 30% to 15%. That's a huge reduction, and it's gotten to the point where we're 3% below the average for the developed countries. So everybody says, let the developing countries do the manufacturing, developed countries do services, but we're lower than the other developed countries. The result of less manufacturing is less innovation, less R&D, less productivity growth. If you don't have productivity growth, you're not competitive. If you take all the trade deficits since 1979, the accumulation of all of those is about $12 trillion, so 12 with a T. And that's just for perspective. That's equal to the value of the NASDAQ, the high-tech stocks. It's equal to 2/3 of total US home equity. So foreign countries, foreign companies, foreign individuals are holding our dollars and could come in and buy the NASDAQ, for example, and own it, and we wouldn't own it anymore. Eventually, if the problem isn't fixed, the dollar will collapse. It'll go down like a banana republic. Traditionally, when a country had a trade deficit like we have, their currency gradually adjusts, they get more competitive, and then pretty soon the trade deficit goes away. But that has not happened for the US because we're also the reserve currency, which holds our currency up, and so we're a great place to be a bank and a horrible place to be a manufacturing company. Another way of looking at this, our self-sufficiency, the percentage of the goods that we consume, we produce less than 50% of what we consume. So if there's ever a crisis, if there's ever the inability to import, if our dollar does collapse and things from offshore get crazy more expensive, if we have a war, we don't have the capability to produce even 50% of what we consume. So that's not a long-term viable solution. The benefits of eliminating the trade deficit are huge. As I said, manufacturing will increase about 40%. That's a 5 million increase in manufacturing. Obviously, we can't do it tomorrow because we don't have enough people today. But by seeing that the manufacturing is coming back, it'll be easier to attract the smart kids into manufacturing because they'll see that it's a great career. We will cut the US budget deficit. All the politicians in Washington no longer seem to talk about the budget deficit, but it's a crisis and it's going to keep getting worse. And I've seen studies that say that the budget deficit will be cut in half if we eliminate the trade deficit. We'll restore the middle class. Everybody complains about the income inequality. Largely it's because we've lost all those good manufacturing jobs. We'll bring back the small to medium-sized corporations, the family-owned job shops that should be the core of our manufacturing but have been weakened so much. We'll reduce global pollution. Make things in China, the electricity is dirty, the factories are more polluting, you have to drag this stuff halfway across the world. We can have both productivity and growth in manufacturing employment. You don't have to choose between those two. So we see a virtuous cycle where as we reshore, companies increase their capacity utilization. As that happens, they have the money and the need to invest. When they invest, their productivity goes up. When that happens, they become more competitive, and therefore they're able to reshore more. So by starting that cycle and continuing that cycle, the US will win. But we haven't been doing enough. This is a graph that I got from Pat McGimmon at AMT, and it shows in red Chinese machine tool consumption and in blue US machine tool consumption. And back 20 years ago, we were consuming twice as much as they were, but then they joined WTO, they got all the work from here, and now China consumes 3 times as much in machine tools as we do each year. And so how can we expect to improve our productivity relative to theirs if they're buying a lot more productivity improving equipment than we are? So one thing you can do to help make all this happen is get out there and buy some machines today and make this whole thing happen. So a couple of myths that I want to deal with. And these are, I think, are really important because they influence the national debate. A lot of the economists, a lot of the pundits will say, forget all this, few jobs can be brought back. That's history, that's never going to happen again. In 2017, reshoring plus FDI, foreign direct investment, brought back 170,000 manufacturing jobs. That's 90% of the total increase in manufacturing. Often I read, the robots are going to take all of our jobs, tax them. Bill Gates says that, tax the robots, otherwise everybody will be sitting around with nothing to do. We need money to give to them when they sit there with nothing to do. Well, our view, we will lose more jobs to Chinese automation if we do not automate than we will to US automation if we do automate. So it's essential to automate. We're going to be better off, have more jobs. Professor Michael Hicks at Ball State has been repeatedly quoted to the effect that almost all of the job losses in the last 20 years have been due to productivity, not to offshoring. He says maybe 4 to 13% has been lost to offshoring, and everybody else agrees he's totally wrong, but he's the one that gets quoted. At least 60% of the job losses have been to offshoring, and productivity has actually been historically slow, 1% or less for the last 10 years. And if we don't understand that, if we don't understand that we lost the jobs to offshoring, we can't understand that we can bring back millions of jobs by reshoring. The sophisticated economists claim that we cannot reduce the trade deficit because the U.S. savings rate is so low. There's an identity in the equations that define the economy, and it says if the savings rate is low, the trade deficit has to be high. And we say, well, it doesn't exactly work that way. It goes the opposite direction. Because we have a high trade deficit, we have fewer people working at lower wages, saving less money, paying less taxes, more safety net expenditures, and that is significantly driving the savings rate down. So the answer to the whole thing is to reduce the trade deficit. Often I'll see graphs that say, here's what's happened to US agricultural employment. It's come down from like 90% of employment down to 3%, and manufacturing is going to go the same way. Forget about it, it's inevitable. And I say that's not necessarily true, that ag is high volume, low mix. Think of acres and acres of wheat fields and cornfields, pretty easy to automate, whereas manufacturing is increasingly customized. It's low volume, high mix. A lot harder to get that same level of automation with one man turning out millions of dollars worth per year. So we see the real reality as the US being on a tilted playing field. And why do I say it's tilted? Hello, Dean. Because every year after year, we have roughly a $700 billion goods, things, trade deficit. And if we were competitive, that wouldn't be the case. We'd be break even. And so we're the team on the bottom fighting our way uphill, and so far it's overall not working. So to test this theory and to understand better what's happening, we did a study with Plant Moran. Plant Moran is one of the largest consulting and auditing firms in the country. They cooperated with us on a survey. We asked companies, why do you buy imported raw materials, components, products, instead of doing them here? And overwhelmingly, the answer was price. Price is the problem. Somewhere between 70 and 90% of the problem is price. They go offshore for price. They don't go for quality. They don't go for innovation. They go for price. And then we asked them, well, how much is that price difference? And as you can see here in the graph, about a third of the product that they buy from offshore, the price is 50% or less of the US price. And about 50% of it is 60% or less of the US price. So those are pretty hard to get back. But the bars at the top say 20, 30%, that's accessible. And the policies I'll show you are aimed at bringing that 20 or 30% back. And it turns out you only have to bring back about 20, 25% of what's offshore to completely balance the trade deficit and get away from all the trade wars and everything else that's going on. So to let you see what's happened so far, this graph shows the trends in reshoring by US companies and FDI by foreign companies into the US. And you can see that in 2017, the total of the two, the orange bar is the FDI, the blue is the reshoring, the sum of the two is about 171,000 manufacturing jobs brought back, which was up 50% from 2016 and about 2,800% from 2010. So it's been dramatic so far, and it's continued at about that same pace in 2018. So the Reshoring Initiative, that's my not-for-profit, very generously supported by AMT, NTMA, PMA, many of the machine tool companies here, GF, and others. Our job is to help accelerate that trend, to bring the jobs back from offshore, to help bring it back today and fix that playing field tilt for tomorrow. To do this, we provide the total cost of ownership estimator, which is free online for you to use. It's on our website. And companies, if you're a procurement person, you can use it for buying. But if you're a salesperson, if you work for one of the exhibitors here, for example, you can use it for selling. If you work for a job shop and you're competing with imports, you can use the TCO estimator for selling against imports by helping them to understand the math. So to let you see an example of that, this chart shows for an example, a Chinese part at $70, a US part at $100. So the procurement person looks at that and says, pretty easy decision, we'll send the new part off to China. But when they did TCO, it was 98 for China, 108 for the US. Now there's only a 10% difference instead of 30%. and assuming that the Chinese wages continue to go up at the rate they have, within 2 or 3 years, the total cost from China will be higher. So hopefully, the company will make the decision not to send any more work off and to start bringing the work back and coming to you to buy the products that they need. So to dig a little deeper into that, the brown chart here shows the Chinese price relative to the US price as a percentage of the US price, like 75% or 100%. And you can see that the mode or the central tendency for that is around 75%, 72%. But the mode for the total cost of ownership, when they've included all the other factors, the duty and the freight, the carrying cost of inventory, all these other key factors, shifts to the green chart, which is now around 80, 85%. So all of a sudden, about 25% of the total that's being imported is above 100% of the US level, and therefore makes sense for companies to start to bring back. So we have developed a program to help accelerate that. We call it the Import Substitution Program. So let's say you're making valves and you're losing orders to the imports, and we can tell you which importers are bringing in the largest quantities for the kind of valves you make, how much they're bringing in, roughly what they're paying for them, and then train you to go to them and say, why are you bringing those in? We can make them here for you at maybe 10, 15% above the price you're paying. And when you use the total cost of ownership, you'll see that actually you'll be more profitable. So we're here to help you do that. So here's some logos of some of the biggest reshorers and some small ones, some job shops. So big companies like GM and Whirlpool can reshore, but also a job shop that does the machining for them reshores when it makes the parts that Whirlpool, GM, Caterpillar need. So my best example of this is a company called Mori Corp out in the suburbs. They populate printed circuit boards. And they came to me about a year and a half ago. They were about to lose an order from their best US customer. They were going to lose it to China over price. And so Tony, the VP sales, and I did the TCO analysis. He took it to his customer and showed the customer that even though Mori's price was high, his total cost was low. And Tony says this was key to saving a $60 million order. So $60 million order saved by helping the customer see the math correctly. We're here to help you do that. So to fix all this, we need to get the US price to be competitive here with offshore. If we don't do that, none of the other actions are going to work. Right now, President Trump has done the tariff thing, but that's helped the steel industry and the aluminum making industry, but it's hurt the people that use steel and aluminum. So it's arguable whether it's helped the country at all. So we want a policy that is uniformly lifting all industries. It will help the steel industry and will help the steel users, for example. So we've put together and sent to the administration the Competitiveness Toolkit. This is how the country can become competitive in general across the board. So we've identified a series of policies. For example, skilled workforce, get our skilled workforce to be as good as Germany and Switzerland's. We believe that's worth about 5 percentage points on price advantage. Get the corporate tax rate down to 15%. This was coming from 35 when we did the study, so we're already about 2/3 of the way there, worth a couple of percent. Have a value-added tax. The rest of the world has a value-added tax. We don't. When we ship our product to them, they put a 15% tax on us. When they ship their product to us, they get a 15% credit. We're fighting with our arms tied behind our back. Get the dollar down by 20%. Series of things here that will work. If you add that total up, if you put all those things in, it would reduce our pricing by about 50%. But we don't need to come down by 50%. If you come back to this chart, we'll recall that especially using TCO, a significant percentage of the work is already around or above the 100 percentage point. And so this chart, you can see that if we wanted, for example, to cut the goods trade deficit by 60%, which would be about 3 million manufacturing jobs, we'd have to cut our US price by, say, 20% if the companies continued to look at price, or maybe by 5% if we can convince all the customers to look at total cost of ownership. So we need 20 to 25% price reduction, and I showed you a list of actions that can give us 51% price reduction. So we believe that's the right thing to do. We've been waiting for President Trump to implement it. Another thing I'd like to tell you about is the second annual National Metalworking Reshoring Award. This is put on by AMT, our host here, NTMA, National Tooling and Machining Association, the PMA, Precision Metal Forming Association, and the Reshoring Initiative. And any kind of metalworking is eligible. It has to have been reshored in the last 5-6 years, coming in from outside North America to North America, so we're including Canada and Mexico in this. And OEMs can participate, and so can job shops and contract manufacturers. There's a website here on AMT where you can apply, and you can also come to the Reshoring Initiative website and get access to it there. The deadline is the end of January of next year, and the award will be announced, the winner will be announced at the MFG meeting March 8th, 2019. So Reshoring Initiative is a nonprofit with 27 sponsors. You can see them listed here. Again, we're honored by AMT. The DGS Gardner, Modern Machine Shop, has been a great supporter. United Grinding right over here. George Fisher Machining Solutions, that's where I used to work. It was a great company, is a great company. And the rest of these great organizations and manufacturing companies that you see here. So, some questions for you. Anybody who's interested, pull out a business card. If you want to reevaluate offshoring, if your company offshores, you'd like to reevaluate, you'd like to have some help convincing your company to bring the work back, put an A on it. If you want to sell more against imports, if you're a job shop and you're losing orders or at risk of losing orders to imports, put a B on it. If you have a reshoring case to report, put a C on it. And anybody who reports a reshoring case, and it turns out to be a real case, they'll get a Manufacturing is Cool t-shirt, okay, made in the USA out of US cotton, of course. If you'd like to compete or think of competing for the award, put a D on it. So get out your business cards, mark those up. And Amber, who introduced me, Amber, okay, fairly easy to find, is she'd love to have your card. She has my business cards for you so you can reach me, and she'd love to get your business card so I can reach you. So the challenge is to grow manufacturing by 40%. It'll take 10 or 20 years. This isn't something that'll happen tomorrow, but if we don't start now, it won't happen. So we've had great momentum the last 10 years. We'd like to keep that up. We need your help to do it. So if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to come up and ask them, or I'll be around here for as long as anybody wants to ask questions or give me their solution or make a better recommendation. So I look forward to your help. I look forward to helping you. Any questions for right now? Anybody wants to get famous and get in the TV? Okay, so I'm here, we're done. I'm here, I'd like to have you come up and talk to us. Thank you very much.